Hi, everyone. This is Jason. Welcome back to the show. Joining me again today is Naomi Brockwell. We all know and love her, so we're going to skip over all the introductions. Naomi, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always an absolute pleasure, Jason.
The reason why I wanted to speak with you today was because you've been going through the Edward Snowden book and making videos about the different insights that he's been giving. And I have my copy here.
Oh, yay. Have you read it yet?
I have. And well, I have the hard copy and I have the audiobook. And
which one do you prefer?
Because of the audiobook makes it easy to keep up with the book and do other things at the same time.
Right.
I lean towards audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel safer with the hardcover.
I bet I know why.
And it's the funniest thing because, you know, before I never thought of that until I got this book, where I could potentially see the change based on outside forces, like redactions and sections cut out and things like that. So I got the book. I paid cash for it.
You went all out. You were like ticking all the boxes there.
Well, I did. I mean, I don't think you can be in our space for a long time without thinking, maybe I should cover my tracks a little bit better.
Did you buy it on Open Bazaar?
No, I went to Barnes and Noble and walked up to them, and they were like, "Oh, well, if you get a account, you'll no."
Yeah, that's how they get you.
That's how they get me. So, you were already into privacy before the book. I mean, you've been in the crypto space since as long as I can remember. So you got in about what, 2013 was when you first started talking about?
That's when I first started making videos about it. Yeah.
Right. But have you, a part of me in this space feels that we're leaving out a large conversation when it comes to privacy.
Mm-hmm.
That we're talking about money and we're talking about the market and we're talking about investing, but we're not talking about how to secure this stuff. And the reason in the notes that I sent over, the New York Post reported that this teenager in New York actually stole $1 million worth of cryptocurrency through SIM jacking, which is basically when you tell like say I call the phone company and says, and I pretend to be you, how unlikely that is. And
well, I'm Naomi Brockwell, I'm definitely Australian.
Right. And they'll send your phone, basically they'll make your phone my phone. And then I can change all of your information around so that you're locked out of it and I have it. And so this is how this person was able to do that. They were SIM jacking. And I wanted to get your opinion on how we can improve our privacy in the crypto space, especially when we're talking about new people.
Well, I think that there is a subtle difference between privacy and security. So this was a security issue, that these people who were keeping their money in accounts where the only security measure was a phone number, whether it's like a confirmation SMS that they get given or something like that. And that's just terrible, terrible security for your accounts. Everyone always says, well, don't leave your money on exchanges. But there are lots of, online wallets, for example. There are lots of custodial wallets people use. And if you're using SIM card two-factor, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot, because it's like we've been talking about this for years. In fact, years ago, Coinbase actually made it the default that you had to use an authenticator app. You could no longer use SIM card. And I think that was their way of covering themselves, because exchanges don't want people, breaking into other people's accounts and stealing money, because then they might be liable for that, not providing good security, even though really the onus is on the individual to make sure that they have good security for their money. So I think like we had this issue, Michael Turpin sued AT&T because this happened to him. Someone ported his number over to another SIM and all this money was stolen. So then he called AT&T, got all of these notes written on his account. It was like a high alert account. So, you know, he put in all the security protocols, like measures he possibly could to stop this from happening again. You know, you had to call him. He had to come in person. He had to show 57 types of identification and a urine sample, like whatever, you know, he like went all out. It wasn't quite that, but it was all written on his account. But then it happened again. They ported his SIM again. And it just goes to show you, I mean, a lot of the times with these phone companies, it is an inside job. So it doesn't matter what notes you have on the account. They're just going to say, oh, I'm just going to ignore that because I'm doing this job for this person who wants to break into the account. You got to realize there are lots of people who are compromised in these, and you've got to protect yourself and make sure that your security measures are airtight. It's such a difficult thing to do, and no one really achieves it, but you can get incrementally better. And a lot of people, like, I mean, Michael Tobin then sued AT&T for this, which I think is fair because he went through all the security measures. But then at the same time, why are you leaving that much money in an exchange? Why are you leaving it online? Like, I mean, I think we're at the stage now where people realize what better security measures, what they look like, and you should be taking the precautions that you need to. And I mean, I think that applies to not just cryptocurrency, but to your data in general. You know, I went to this privacy exhibition, was like this pop-up exhibition in San Francisco last month, and it was put on, I think it's called the Glass Room, and it was a fascinating exhibition, but also a little bit daunting, because what they did was they provided these real life scenarios of how your data is used, how your data is hijacked, all the information we're leaking on a day-to-day basis that we don't even realize we're leaking, whether it's just by having your Wi-Fi turned on and not connecting to networks and setting out probe requests, or whether it's just having, you know, cameras around you that are, you know, taking images of your face, putting it into databases, whether it's by, you know, there are so many things going on that we don't realize our data is being compromised or our privacy is being compromised. And one of these things in this museum was this book. It was just like this shelf of all these books, and it was called the LinkedIn the LinkedIn hack part of this museum. And it's like, okay, what's that? But you remember, I think it was 2012, LinkedIn had a giant data breach. Maybe it was 2014.
Oh, yeah.
Giant data breach, and all these passwords were released. Well, this museum just printed out all the passwords in real text and put them in these books. So you go in and you can look through, and if you had a LinkedIn account at that time, you could look through and find your password. Now, this is kind of a daunting thing to see in real life, because we hear all these things about data breaches and yada, yada, yada. And we don't realize that to this day, the data from the LinkedIn breach is still being resold on the black market. And why is that? Because people don't use unique passwords. People will log into LinkedIn with their email address and a password, and they'll use that password on all these other websites. And that's how most hacks happen in the space, in life, is that you'll have a hack, you'll have a data breach, and you'll reveal people's passwords. So then hackers just retry those passwords on a bunch of different websites until they get a success. And sometimes there are tiny little modifiers. So you might have like, you know, maybe my password is Naomi the Best, but then I just like change the numbers at the end and it's today's date, or, you know, like people do all these little modifiers, and it's just so insecure. You shouldn't do that, because once you've basically got the essence of a password, it's not that hard to brute force a few numbers at the end or a couple of changed letters. And people don't realize that, and they don't realize how vulnerable this stuff is. So that was kind of a daunting thing, but it makes you realize it's not just about taking precautions with your crypto and making sure that you don't have bad, lax security measures. You're not leaving your money in exchanges unnecessarily. You're not using SMS two-factor on your accounts. But with life in general, you know, passwords, just making sure they're secure. Making sure, like, have you ever transmitted a password over email to someone? Because that's out in the open. You know, there are databases that just collect all of this information. And if it's not end-to-end encryption, which your Gmail isn't, then that is really easily accessible information. So just make sure that you're protecting yourself. Just have some thoughtfulness when you're creating your passwords or going through your day-to-day life, and just seeing little areas where you can improve your security and privacy.
Right. Well, because like what I started to do is, well, I use a password manager anyway. So I use Bitwarden. And and I've also started to use burner email addresses.
They're interesting.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. You know, and for anyone who doesn't know what a burner email address is it's a randomly generated email address that points to an actual email address. And then once you're done with it, you just disconnect it and you no longer receive emails from that source.
Yeah.
And and like you were saying about passwords, you know, we tend to use the same passwords over and over again. You know, it's just habit. You know, it's easy to remember, and it becomes a habit. Like I just saw on Twitter a report come through that 123456 is still the most widely used password.
What?
123456.
That makes me so sad. We have such a long way to go.
Well, and you know, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to start up again this series that I'm doing about cybersecurity and private. And I use the word privacy, but I mean, for me, I think privacy, you can't have privacy if you don't have proper security.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, you know, it for me, it tends to go hand in hand. And we have people coming from the broader populace who are coming into crypto, and they're going to come in eventually anyway, one way or the other. And but they're bringing their bad habits with them. And we have people in the space who aren't. Well, you are, and I wanted to talk to you about that because I'm seeing that your videos are being used in classrooms now. Um, we don't have enough people telling people how to be secure in what they're doing. And I want to thank you for making those videos because you're going to help alleviate that problem. But
well, you're welcome, and thank you for watching. Thank you for being interested.
Well, no, they're great videos, and guys, I'm going to link Naomi's channel to this because I want you to watch those. But when you first found out that they were being used in classrooms, how did you feel about that?
Oh, it's so exciting. There's this one guy who been sending me videos, and he shows it to his middle school classes because he thinks that students, I mean, we have young people now who have never lived at a time when they didn't have a computer, but never lived at a time when they didn't have the internet, and never lived in a time when they didn't have like a smartphone attached to them, you know, capturing every second of their lives and posting it on Instagram or TikTok or whatever the latest thing is.
Right.
And a lot of these people, they kind of, I mean, when you're younger, you kind of think, well, the world has it figured out. You've probably got smart people in charge. I'm probably protected. These apps wouldn't be available if it, you know, if it was bad for my security or my privacy. There are people looking out for me. And you get older and you realize like, oh, it's an individual's responsibility to look out for this stuff. You know, there's no one who's like this benevolent overseer looking out for us. And I think young people in particular are vulnerable to this because they're just going along with whatever their friends are
Right.
doing. So to know that there are teachers out there who see the importance of privacy and are sharing information about, you know, how do you get rid of metadata from your photos so that when you post on the internet, your location isn't known? How do you stop your phone being a transmitter that lets stores know exactly where you're going, like which aisle you're slowing down in, like sending you all this, like creating this database that is basically a permanent record for you with your identity attached, and just feeding all this information into it. And like, how do we educate young people about that so that they know early on, like these people, I mean, I'm really happy that my adolescence was without smartphones and digital cameras. So I'm
Yeah,
very
definitely.
happy that those moments were not immortalized and then posted on the internet. But for a lot of people, you know, they're not so lucky, and I think that they don't realize that the internet has become this permanent thing because that's what the NSA wants it to be. And Snowden talks about that in his book. He talks about this transition from the early web, where it was this very pseudonymous area where, you know, people could go on and they could say whatever they want, and they were behind this kind of mask. Their real identity wasn't revealed. And so they weren't like wedded to their thoughts. They were just kind of throwing out ideas and then learning from other people and then evolving their ideas. And that's very much changed because now everything we do is linked to our permanent identity. Everything we type into Google, everything goes in this permanent record that Snowden unveiled with the 2013 revelations. But everything is revealed, and everything is stored forever in this permanent record. And that's really not a good place for a young person to grow up, because you need to have the freedom and the flexibility to not be judged by your thoughts that are not particularly well formed. You're just kind of thinking these ideas for the first time. You need like a safe space, and it can't be a safe space if your permanent identity, if your actual real world identity is attached to that. And he talks about this transition and how like society is becoming more and more polarized, because we put out these ideas and then someone finds something we said from like 9 years ago and they call us out on it. It's like, who's the same person they were 9 years ago? Like, I mean, that stuff is craziness. So
and to that point, I mean, we're seeing it play out now, because Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks is going through that right now. You know, he's running for Congress to replace Katie Hill in California, and a lot of the things he wrote back when he was trying to be edgy are now being dragged back up, and because the internet doesn't forget.
The internet doesn't forget. The internet, for a while, we thought that it was a place where it could forget. And there was this interesting moment in Snowden's book where he said, you know, he's thinking about this permanent record that he knows is out there. And he was thinking about all of these old pseudonyms he used to use when he was a teenager, and he was on forums chatting with people. And he said, you know, with a few lines of code, he could probably delete his existence from the internet. But then he decided not to do that, because that isn't a world, you know, like that's his history. That's part of who he is. And I think that the problem that we're facing right now is people think that we're these static beings, that we are these fully formed people that kind of go through life and we will always be the same. And so you can judge people now for what they said 10 years ago, because somehow in our heads we've got this idea that they're the exact same person. And the fact is, we're constantly in flux. We are these fluid beings that are, you know, adapting and learning and changing and evolving. And Snowden said, like, although he could delete that history, we need to start embracing the fact that this is who we are. It may not be who we are still today, but it was a part of us, and that's how we came to be who we are now. And we have to stop denying that, and also stop judging people for things like in the past, and realize that people can change. Because I think that, yeah, we're at this dangerous situation now where young people are on the internet their entire lives, and you cannot judge. You know, you can't judge a 25-year-old for something they said when they were 15. That's craziness. I remember when I was cleaning out my old house, and I found all of these journals that I used to write, because I used to write all the time in journals. I do it occasionally still, but like nowhere near as frequently. And so I was like, oh, should I read through this? I was a little bit hesitant, and I should have been hesitant, because I started reading this stuff. I didn't even recognize the tone of my voice in these writings. It was so different from who I think I am now. At the time, I was like, I thought I was pretty cool, you know. I thought I was cool. I'm reading these journals just like, oh my God, how could anyone stand me? And you know, it's like, it's embarrassing to look back at who we were, but it's part of being human. You know, you grow and you live life and you learn things and you add that to your character. And yeah, so it's this strange thing that happens, like, since the NSA's primary goal right now is to create this permanent in terms of data. They want to collect things in perpetuity. They've, you know, commissioned these giant databases. A few years ago, Amazon won the commission to build this database in the middle of nowhere that is basically to store all these things that they collect through both active and passive collection of our data. And passive collection means everything that you've ever typed into Google, even if you didn't press enter, that's all being stored in this permanent record attached to your name. The active collection is when you type in a trigger word. Heaven forbid you should type in the word protest or the word VPN or anonymous proxy server, because then you've triggered this whole other thing, which is this active collection. Then it gets routed through an entirely different NSA server. Your whatever website you're visiting, it gets injected with a little bit of malware that goes back to your computer, all happening in like a split second. And you just end up at the page that you wanted to visit in the first place. But what's actually in your computer is a bit of malware that means that the NSA now owns your device. So that's the active collection part, and they want to collect all of this in perpetuity. I think it's terrifying. Like, it completely changes our relationship with life if we go from being these creatures that live life and experience things in the moment, and they're these transient things and they're in flux and they disappear, and there's something beautiful in that kind of churn. But once you start collecting things in perpetuity, that changes our relationship with how we live life. And like, I don't know if you notice a difference between how you live life, like before you got a camera and after you got a camera, because I'm addicted to taking photos. Like, I want to capture everything. I have like terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of videos and photos that I've taken just since getting a digital camera, and I'm addicted to it. But it's like this idea, this need to like get things and hold on to them. But it really does change how we live our lives. Sometimes it's nice to kind of just cut yourself off from the past, maybe not remember everything, maybe not collect everything, maybe not be a hoarder. But it's this very different way that we're living these days.
Well, leave it as a memory, something that you can feel as opposed to just see. Because I mean, you look at pictures all the time, and you don't always get an emotional response for seeing it because it's just something random in your phone.
Oh, this blurry shot of someone walking away.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of goes into what we're doing as content creators as well, because these videos are going to be stored on somebody's server, and as soon as I upload it to YouTube, it's going to be run through all kinds of different databases, and you have people who come on social media and basically act like idiots, and that's going to come back and bite them one day because, as you said, perpetuity.
I act like an idiot on social media all the time.
No, you don't. Stop that. Now, but I mean, it's true, because like and the fact that it's not just the American government doing it, because I read a lawsuit alleging that an app associated with TikTok was uploading people's data to servers in China. So it's one thing if you're getting uploaded to an American server, at least you have the Constitution.
Is it though? Is that one thing? Because they literally ignored the Constitution. They found that all the stuff that they were doing with the wiretapping, etc., was unconstitutional.
No,
Since the Snowden revelations, we've like the courts have ruled that this stuff is unconstitutional. They don't care.
No, I mean, but I mean, at least we have some type of court system that could potentially fight it. I mean, sure, they might be in on it, but at least they could give you the.
In theory, I understand that point people make. Like, in theory, there's a difference between all of these different surveillance states. I think like the principle of the thing is that our devices are so opaque. The apps that we download are so opaque. We have no idea what is going on inside our phone. We don't know what is transmitting at any given time. Even with airplane mode on, we have no idea whether that's stopping signals being received by our phone or being emitted by our phone. We just have no way of knowing. And what's more is that we have this ignorance of how our apps work. We just don't have access to the information of what's going on. There was like a phone cam hack that was released recently that I talked about, just showing that even the permission of just having access to storage, which is almost a default permission for a lot of apps, by having that app permission on an Android phone, it meant that people could remotely access your camera, your sound. Like, I mean, it's kind of terrifying that we're downloading apps where we're giving permissions that seem innocuous, but they actually allow people to take over our devices. But the fact is, we just have ignorance about what's going on. And like this TikTok situation, there's so much stuff going on. Like, Google purchases so much data. It purchases so much data, because we have apps going all the time. We have like microphones being activated all the time. People are selling this data. Companies are buying this data. They're using it for all kinds of reasons. And it's generally attached to our online identities. And it's just, we need to get to a situation where we're getting more educated about this stuff, so that we can start taking preventative measures. Because it's all fun and games to say, like, it's all fine to say, who cares? I'm not that interesting. But the fact is, we're all pretty interesting.
And it doesn't matter how interesting you are. They shouldn't be doing it.
Right. They shouldn't be doing it. And if we know that they have the ability to do it, you can always say, oh, well, there should be a law. Oh, we'll get the government to protect,
Yeah.
all of this stuff. Or you can just start realizing what this technology is capable of and start taking precautions so that you don't need to rely on other people, picking up the slack and protecting you. You can say, oh, well, I'll start taking proactive measures myself.
It's one of those things where we get these apps that get uploaded and they come from random places. And we don't know anything about the developer. We don't know what connection they have to whatever country it originates from. But we're giving them our information, we're giving them our images, we're giving them information about our families.
Yeah.
And we have no idea.
Giving them our location, we're giving them access to the microphone, we're giving,
Exactly. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that you don't know where these people are coming from. You're just assuming that it's safe because it was in the Play Store or the App Store.
I agree with your point. We just need to become a little more savvy, I think.
Yeah. And that's really what it is. And, and I was talking to a friend of mine, Kim Crowley, she's a cybersecurity expert. And, it basically amounts to the people need to start being as deceptive as the government. You don't need to tell everyone, and you don't need to tell everyone your personal business. You don't have to give Google your actual phone number or it's none of their business. They don't have to have that. I know you have to go. So Naomi, thank you again for joining me today and for putting up with all the technical difficulties. And
it's the way that all of this works. We all get tech difficulties. So you're good.
Yeah. And so hopefully I can have you back on in the future and we can and talk about some more stuff. Do you have any events coming up? Any
Yeah, there's a bunch of things going on. I think the most excited I am is about Anarchapulco, which is February next year, and you suggested you might be heading there. Is that correct?
I'm trying, and I'm trying. If I can get the tickets and some airfare. I hear that it's kind of expensive to go from the U.S. to Acapulco.
It's not too good, but I mean, I'm from Australia originally, so I'm used to ridiculously expensive airfares. But no, it should be a whole lot of fun. And one thing that I just kind of mention as we leave, the Anarchapulco team has been reimbursing speakers with crypto and paying for things using crypto. And I could safely say that I think that I have emceed more crypto conferences than anyone else in the world, doing this for years and doing a whole bunch of events. And you would be surprised how few conferences there are that are willing to pay me in cryptocurrency, which is always really disappointing, to be honest. Really disappointing to see conferences, especially the ones who present themselves as, oh, we're an all crypto event, or all our merchants are accepting crypto, all this stuff. And then behind the scenes, you say, okay, well, here's crypto address for 5 different currencies, choose your pick, and then they say, oh no, we can't pay you with that, but we'll send a wire transfer and then you'll get charged $30 for the privilege, or we'll send PayPal and you get charged $15, or even if they use something that it isn't charged, it is disappointing to see people pretending to support this ecosystem and just talking the talk to get people through their doors. I want to see more people walking the walk. And one thing I will say about Anarchapulco is, from what I've seen so far, they are walking the walk. So I'm excited about this conference.
Definitely. Well, I can't wait. I'm definitely going to try. And there's always Bitcoin 2020. So if nothing else, I'll see you there.
If they pay in crypto, because another thing that I will put in my contract going forward is that I'm not going to accept fiat anymore. And they didn't pay me in crypto this year. So we'll see.
And see, that's why we love you. You're legit. When you say you're about Bitcoin, you're about Bitcoin. So, and I really appreciate that. And thank you for being the voice of so much knowledge and helping us understand what's going on. So
you're so lovely, Jason. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. It's always a pleasure.
All right. I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.